Edge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Jerry Carter and Chris Graham. That's me, Chris Graham. And we'll be talking we'll talk some ACC basketball, some Summer League basketball, some ACC footballs. I'm getting ready to head to Charlotte next week for the ACC Football Kickoff. And, I guess, Jerry, we thought there'd be an off season and we'd have some stuff to fill in the summertime, but we've had NBA Summer League, and then now with the football kickoff next week, I guess our off season is pretty much already over at this stage. We might be in mid-July, but it never really ended, and we're starting right back up with next year.
Well, it's really interesting because every time that you think that the NBA has kind of settled down and things have fallen into place, the next shoe drops, if you will. And, the most recent situation was, it kind of makes sense from some aspects, which was Russell Westbrook. Once it was a situation to where Paul George was able to get his way out of Oklahoma City, it was a situation to where that would have left Russell Westbrook in the rebuild of all rebuilds. So we kind of thought something was going to happen to him. And I was pleasantly surprised that they were able to make the trade that they did. I think it gives Westbrook what he's looking for. I just don't know how it's going to play out for Chris Paul and how that's going to affect some of the other players that we follow here and there. I mean, Chris Paul's money, it's almost like John Wall, except Chris Paul's still, still healthy. But the amount of money that he has guaranteed in front of him, I cannot see him playing his days out in Oklahoma City. I do think that they're going to go into a complete rebuild mode. So, what was your first thought when you got Harden and Westbrook back together? What was your first thought there?
Yeah, and so eventually we'll make this. This is what my art is turning something about that has nothing to do with UVA basketball or UVA sports into something about UVA sports. But we'll do that. We'll do that later. Chris Paul. I think he'll be. He's not done moving yet. It seems almost clear that he's going to be flipped one more time, and probably Miami, it seems, is at least the most interested now, and they've got to probably put some things in place to be able to accommodate his average salary for the last 3 years of his contract is $41 million a year. So they probably got to do some creative work to clear that money on the books and make that possible. But so that's speculative. That's still to come. The aspect of Westbrook leaving OKC, yes, makes total sense because once George left, that was to join Kawhi in Los Angeles with the Clippers. Without Paul George, it just you're in rebuild mode. And credit to the Oklahoma City folks, Stan Presti and his group for last year they thought they had this figured out. We signed Paul George to the 4-year extension. He's staying. We're gonna build around this, and then he comes forward and says, I want to trade. I want to go to LA to play with Kawhi and the Clippers. And you could ride it out. You could, but we saw last year with New Orleans that didn't work out so well with Anthony. And when Anthony Davis wanted to leave, it can really just cause such discord within your system, your program, that you might as well leverage it the best you can. And they leveraged it well. They got all those picks. And then, that made Westbrook expendable. And Westbrook, to his credit, he's not wanted to leave. He stayed when Durant left, and he's made it a point that he's hanging around in OKC. But at his age, which is not Chris Paul's age, I think he's around 30. Chris Paul's 34. But at his age, does he want to be part of a rebuild for the last 4 or 5 or 6 years of his career? No, he doesn't. So, he gets a great situation, at least a lifeline out from a rebuild, and he goes somewhere where the expectation is to win a title. Now, we got to talk about this, Jerry. We were texting last night when this news first came up. James Harden and Russell Westbrook, two of the best players in the NBA, two recent MVPs, and they played together before in OKC. Do they mesh? I'll throw that to you first.
Well, it was kind of interesting. Chris, I read a great article written this week. I apologize, I can't get the credit to the author, but they were talking about the end of the Oklahoma City run, if you will, and they were making comparisons to there's never been a case where you had that much talent in that many positions, and what you netted was one finals appearance.
Yeah.
And you're in a situation where you're talking about Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Westbrook. And it reminded me so much of out here in the Mariners when they had their heyday, and they had Randy Johnson, Ken Griffey Jr., and Alex Rodriguez.
Yeah.
And it was the question was, okay, we can't keep all three of them. We know that we can't. We can't, and just financially you can't. So they go into a situation, and Randy Johnson's contract was up first. And I don't know, I say only with a smile. All Randy wanted was only $12 million a year. And they said, okay, well, we're going to dump Randy Johnson, and we're going to save all of our money so that we can keep A-Rod and Kenny. And it just didn't work out that way. And Oklahoma City just did the same thing. You know, they said, okay, we can't pay all three of these guys. We're going to choose to have Harden be the odd person out. And you're in a situation to where, Westbrook is an interesting fella in that he plays with possibly the biggest chip on anybody's shoulder in any sport at any level. He almost plays angry. And it works for him. I mean, he's put up some crazy numbers. But that's my first question is, you joked last night about, there's only one ball. And I came back to I'll be down at something like Carmelo. You're finished, It's going to be interesting to see with the fact that one of the things, and it's a matter of who you want to go with, where Chris Paul is concerned and James Harden. The various stories back and forth about who really had the problem, who didn't have the problem, and the thought process was that Harden looked disinterested when Paul was trying to run the offense. And I'm sitting there, and Chris Paul is as good as it gets. And while he might be on the backside of his career, he's as good as it gets. And if you're going to have trouble making that work, I'm not sure how it's going to work when it's Westbrook and Harden. And the other thing that came out to this morning, I've seen this one or not, they're going to make a run against Andy. The Warriors said, hey, we're going to retire his jersey, but he doesn't fit into our budget. Memphis has him, says, we're not doing a buyout, we're going to trade him. And that's who the Rockets are going to go after to have another big-game player. And I have to worry a little bit about distribution of the basketball. I guess that's my first thought.
Yeah. My thought is it's similar. The way they'll play next year is very similar, I assume, to how they played this year. Because Harden and Paul are 2 point guards, ball-dominant point guards, and Harden and Westbrook are two ball-dominant point guards. There's 48 minutes in an NBA game. Regular season minutes, very few guys average over 36 minutes a game. And so, you start thinking substitution patterns. If you're smart, and Mike D'Antoni, I thought, did it really well during the regular season the last couple of years with Harden and Paul. You make sure, they play together. I mean, they play together the first few minutes of the game, and then the last few minutes of the game they're together, and then you substitute in and out, and you always make sure one of those guys is on the floor. And you saw them do that really well. I mean, a lot of folks don't watch the NBA quite as close until the playoffs, but when you saw them play the Warriors, there was always one of those guys on the floor. And so, so it's not 48 minutes of two guys fighting for the ball like kids on a playground, but for those first 6 minutes and the last 6 minutes, there kind of is an issue with there only being the one basketball. I mean, so for the other, what would that be, 36 minutes, in between the middle of the first quarter and the middle of the fourth quarter, I mean, you've got those guys together some, and then some of those minutes you've got at least one of those guys out there. And Westbrook is an upgrade over Paul from the standpoint of, all right, if we're going to look at the other point guard alongside Harden, I'll take Westbrook. He's not as good a shooter, but he's a great penetrator. He can finish, and he does so much. But yeah, the problem it isn't even the first 6 minutes. First 6 minutes of the game is a feeling out process. It's in those last 6 minutes. Who gets the ball? And it's not like, okay, and who gets the ball? The answer is James Harden gets the ball. So if the answer is James Harden gets the ball, then what is Russell Westbrook in those situations? He's not a good 3-point shooter. He's just not. And so defensively, you can't now. You really can't certainly double or cheat with a defender behind Harden quite as easily, because Westbrook can make you pay. He can get the ball and drive to the basket, but it does. I mean, does he sulk? The first couple of times they lose a game and he doesn't get the ball in the last couple of minutes because Harden's got the ball, does he sulk? I mean, and we kind of know a little bit about his reputation that he does. And I wonder too. We've talked about how they played together in OKC, but you have to remember Harden was a sixth man then. He was the bench guy then, and so kind of goes with what I was saying about how there's 48 minutes in a game, and you just make sure substitution pattern-wise that there's always one of those two guys on the floor. OKC did that really well back when those three were together. Those three sublime talents were together. We didn't get to see them together very long, unfortunately. If we'd have seen them play at closer to their peak for a longer period of time, they would have won quite a few championships. But Oklahoma City pulled the trigger too soon. They would even admit that in getting rid of Harden early and allowing him to flourish somewhere else. But maybe they saw something too. Maybe they saw, hey, we can't have three guys fighting over the ball. Durant needs the ball a lot too to be able to be effective. So, yeah, that's going to be a question. Now I'll throw this out, Jerry. So I started thinking about this when we were texting last night, and I knew we would talk about this on the podcast today. So there are Houston, the Clippers, and the Lakers would be the three teams who made all the earth-shattering moves in this postseason. I started thinking about those rosters. And all three of those are teams we're all saying are going to be the favorites to win next year until we, start seeing some games next season. So think about this. The Rockets are 2 point guards. They're Harden and Russell Westbrook. The Lakers are two power forwards, LeBron James and Anthony Davis. The Clippers are two small forwards, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Kind of interesting roster construction-wise. The fact that your two best players play the same position on all three of those teams, different positions from team to team, but they stocked up on the same guy in all three cases. Who do you think? I have an idea on this, but who do you think might have the advantage just between those three teams?
Well, the one thing, Chris, that really stuck out to me, and whether it happens or not, I don't know, but the Lakers are actually talking about moving LeBron to the point. And to me, that opens up a whole other situation. Boogie Cousins signed, and once again, it was a situation where he talked about how much he enjoyed playing with Anthony Davis, and we saw flashes of Boogie Cousins in the postseason. The fact that he came back from the second injury was nothing short of amazing. But if you take LeBron James and play him at the point, it's kind of mind-boggling from an exciting standpoint of what that could lead to. You're in a situation where these guys now it's going to be a matter of filling out the rosters. And again, the cap is just so different in basketball than it is in the other sports. Again, I hate to say bully, but Boogie says, well, hey, if I'm only going to get $3 million a year, this is where I want to go. I want to go play with Anthony Davis. And when those two were both in New Orleans and they were both healthy, that they were a pretty potent combo there. So instead of thinking about LeBron in that sharing the same role as Anthony Davis, now you're talking about a situation where, again, we don't know who else is going to be on the roster. I understand, Quinn Cook signed there, and he'll be an option. I think that Rondo will end up staying involved at basically a minimum amount of money. So as much as I hate to say it, because they are matched up position-wise, if they really take LeBron and move him to the point and put the ball in his hands coming up, I think it's advantage Lakers. Not in those sets that you talked about.
Well, if LeBron was 27 years old, that would be a great move. He's not. He's 35. And the idea of LeBron James having to play point for 82 games plus playoffs is well, one, he's not going to play 82 games because he'd get hurt. He can't defend the point anymore at his age. He's 6'8", 250, and the idea of him keeping up with smaller, faster guys for that long. Now, that doesn't say don't run the offense through LeBron. But I'm thinking about Michael Jordan. Later in his career, Jordan through his 20s into his early 30s, maybe to around the age of 30, he was a sublime player, but it was athletics. He was just such a great athlete, no one could contain him. As he got older, he got smarter. Instead of trying to out athletic everybody, think about the evolution of Jordan into his early 30s, mid 30s. He started playing a little more in the post. I say post, he would post other guards up. He wouldn't be posting Kevin McHale up, but and reducing the wear and tear on his legs. The idea of sticking LeBron out there and making him bring the ball up the court, from minute 1 to minute 48 for the 35 or so minutes he plays in regular season games. The last 6 minutes of the game, LeBron's got the ball. You don't run a play without LeBron touching the ball. I don't even care about a fast break. LeBron touches the ball. I'm thinking more along the lines of Milwaukee and what they do with Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's not the point guard. He's 7 feet tall. But in important possessions, he touches the ball. Magic Johnson, back to the 80s and 90s. Magic Johnson, 6'9". He was a point guard, but he didn't guard Isaiah Thomas, 6'1". They'd figure out other guy to play him, and Magic would kind of cheat off and play the other team's worst offensive player. That's what you do. But here's the team I like, the Clippers. And the Clippers are sexy, Kawhi and Paul George. But here's why I like them, not because they're sexy. Because what I like about them, it's the defense. I just spent a whole season watching Virginia win the national championship, and I think that the reason they won that championship was because of two players, DeAndre Hunter and Braxton Key. Key gets no attention here, and he will next year now that he'll be out from under Hunter's shadow. But it was because you had two guys, 6'8", who could guard anybody from 1 to 5. With Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are a step up at from the college level to the pro level, obviously. But I'm using that analogy to say you've got two guys who are 6'8" who can guard anybody from 1 to 5. Now they also happen to be have incredible offensive talents. But the lineup flexibility that Doc Rivers will have with those two guys is just going to be tremendous. And they are both elite defensive players. They are both elite offensive players now. Kawhi Leonard has made himself into that in recent years. So of those three groupings, the LeBron James, Anthony Davis advantage is they're both great offensive players. You're not going to write it, especially LeBron at this stage of his career. He's not a great defensive player. He's a passable defensive player. Nobody thinks at all about Russell Westbrook and James Harden if they even do play defense. But what sets the Clippers apart, in my view, is the defensive abilities of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And that team is going to be a beast because of what they can do on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I definitely think that if you're looking at the matchup, we'll talk about the big twos. I think you have to give a big coaching advantage to Doc Rivers. I think that the job that Doc Rivers did this year, most people felt like after they moved Blake and DeAndre and JJ and Chris Paul that the Clippers were going to go into a straight rebuild. And the job that Doc Rivers did this year, I think, just going back to his NBA coaching career, might have been his best job ever.
Yeah.
And he talked about coaching people who want to be there, and how fun it was to coach that group. And now you add two, we'll go old school, called two-way players. That's exactly what they are. You described that well. I don't. If you're asking me if the Clippers are playing the Rockets, it's the Clippers all day long, pending the Rockets pulling a bunny out of the hat. I still think the Lakers have so much money tied up at the top of those. It's going to be interesting. I remember the old days. I remember when it was Karl Malone and Gary Payton who were chasing a ring, and they went out and got on the Lakers towards the end of their career. You're still got to have one last wave of people. I think any going to the Rockets could actually make a difference, but it's a situation to where you have to give nothing getting away from D'Antoni or the Lakers situation. I think you have to give the nod from the strategy and the ability to mold the team to Doc Rivers for sure. And all of that goes back to on the West. I'm partial because of Quinn Snyder. This will by far be the best team the Jazz have put on the floor since Jordan beat them in the finals. They added a couple of key pieces that those names aren't going to mean a lot to everybody out there, but not only did they get Connolly, but you're in a situation where they rightfully have their own big three now. You've got Connolly, you've got Donovan, and you've got the Eiffel Tower in there. The defensive player, and they picked up a couple of other players that at the West. We're almost going back to the point of saying, well, the West is so loaded. What's coming out of the East? But it's going to be interesting. The other question, to get your take on this, is do you notice this is more and more about playing with your buddies and personality as much as it is anything else? You see that trend taking place in the NBA.
I do, and I actually like it. One, the last 2 weeks have been so exciting for NBA fans. We're all used to playing fantasy football or baseball or whatever. It feels like we're playing fantasy basketball right now. Like, hey, I wonder what else might happen between now and when the season starts in terms of player movement, because we do probably expect Chris Paul to make a move to Miami and see if Miami can play their way, work their way into contention ahead of the season. But I like it, the idea, certainly we're so far past the idea that guys are, play their whole career with the team they're drafted by. You get to see players. I guess I was thinking about this last night because I'm actually one of those nerds who's actually watching the summer league game when the news pops up. That's how much into basketball I am. That on a random night in July, I'm still watching basketball, and the news pops up, and it made me think. We've had so much flux, but the Warriors were in the last 5 finals. Before this year, LeBron James was in the previous 7 finals. There is fatigue. And the TV ratings did go down certainly this year. And some of that was attributed to, there's no LeBron, but I think there's just a little bit of, we're kind of over the Warriors, we're over LeBron. Let's just see something new. And I'm not saying that fans don't want to see LeBron succeed in LA, especially now with his super team. But I think that there's kind of a need to sort of burn the forest down and let the forest grow again, and we're seeing that. And so, I'm as excited, and we're 3 months out from the NBA starting. I'm as excited about an NBA season going into it as I've been since I was a kid, when the Celtics and Sixers and Lakers and Rockets were all competing and that kind of thing. Because you don't know. For the first time in a while, we start a season, we don't just pencil in or even write in ink that the Warriors are going to be in the finals. For a long time, we just would write LeBron James, whoever he was playing with, they were going to be in the finals. And so we don't know anything right now because we have to figure out how these teams are going to play with each other, and then play against each other. And we won't even. I venture to just guess that as the season goes on next year, the playoffs will start. We still won't know because the regular season is such a crapshoot. You play a game and you have to get on a plane and play a game the next night. When these teams finally meet in April and May and June and have time to scout and game plan and put game plans into place and have to adjust in a 7-game series, that's when we'll know how all this is going to work. It's exciting to me that that's the case, and so yeah, I love it, I can't wait for it to start. It's 3 months away.
It's been really interesting in the fact of the in between or reading between the lines of what's getting said, and you see Curry talking about he's excited about the challenges up in front of him and the mix that they've got on the team, and you hear where Durant was talking about, hey, the off the court noise and Golden State was more than I really wanted to deal with. And it's kind of interesting because now, and Kyrie's a Dookie, I don't hide the fact, but you're in a situation to where Westbrook wore him out, and now it's being said that the Golden State machoism and off the court chatter has worn him out. That's the matchup of the duo that I'm most intrigued by, is how well those two are going to not coexist on the basketball court, but coexist in life as a whole. It's a situation to where, the same way with Harden and Westbrook, are they going to be able to share the ball? I think Durant wants to be a lot more like Kawhi. Kawhi is just, again, I go back to the comment after they beat the Bucks. The team owner said, I've got the best player in the league. And Kawhi comes out and says, I'm not interested in being the best player in the league. I'm interested in being part of the best team in the league. And that's another one we're not going to know how it's going to play out at first, because obviously Durant's going to be coming back. It's interesting because there's so many. You're correct. It's as wide open as it can be. It's as wide open as it's been in a long, long time. And I kind of thought the dust had settled until that trade, and that trade now is going to open the next floodgates, because somebody's going to have to get really, really creative to get Chris Paul's contract to fit into scheme. And like I said, there's people out there like Carmelo Anthony who now are going to say, okay, I've got one more run in me. Let me figure out, where's my best fit. And it's going to be fun. It's going to continue to be fun. But the thing where I was listening to you talk a little bit, switching back from the main core NBA to the players we really like following, not surprised at all by Kyle Guy's success, but I was hoping you might could enlighten me just a little bit more as to what the decision-making process was in regards to Ty Jerome.
Yeah, it seems like, and teams are have different approaches to this. Phoenix, it seems like, the more I read about their situation, that's I feel bad for Ty that he's there now. But they sat him and Cam Johnson both out. And it makes absolutely no sense to me. The reasoning given was, well, they couldn't come until and be a part of our situation until the July 6th start of the league year, and they didn't get a chance to practice with the team, and so ergo we we'll just shut them down. Summer league is practice. That's what it is. It's all. So it's just a chance to get the guys out there, run them out there. They're ostensibly they're in shape. They had to go through all the pre-draft workouts and everything else. So it's not like it's a matter of we're concerned about their physical condition. And they're not life and death games where they don't count towards the NBA championship next year. So it was a chance to just get your guys in there, get the rust off them a little bit. And give you something to work with, give them something to work with going into September. It's around September 20th when camp starts for next season. But yeah, the Suns really, I mean, from Ty's standpoint, he gets drafted by a team that doesn't have a point guard, and so you think, hey, they spent their first round pick on a point guard, maybe Ty's going to be the guy, and then they go out and spend $51 million over 3 years for Ricky Rubio. And you start looking at their roster. Devin Booker's the best player. They drafted a shooting guard, Cam Johnson, with the 11th pick in the first round, and so now you're stocked up at guard, at point guard and shooting guard, and you've got Kelly Oubre Jr., who's also a shooting guard, and so five of your best six players, DeAndre Ayton being the other one, are ones or twos. You don't get extra points towards a potential playoff berth because you have the best ones and twos. You have to go out and win the game, and So yeah, and then this decision, and it's all a crapshoot. But for Kyle Guy now, I'll tell you what, he's been a star of the summer league, such as there is a star of the summer league. He'd rather be the star of the winter league, but. Watching all of his games, and the Kings played 7, and he played lots of minutes in each of those games. Averaged just under 15 points a game for Sacramento. Isaiah Thomas singing his praises last night. I mean, it seemed like every commentator that did a game fell in love with Kyle Guy the more they watched him play. He only ends up with a 2-way contract, and I'm a little disappointed for Kyle in that respect. He ends up with and those 2-way contracts only allow you to play 45 days in the NBA, and you got to spend the rest of the time in the G League. I wonder if he maybe signed that contract a little too soon. I mean, obviously, as a draft pick, you're beholden to them for a couple of years. But boy, I think to me, and of course, I've got biased eyes, but he was often the best player on the court. There are going to be guys that he played with in each of these 7 games who are going to be in the NBA next year. I wonder if the Kings, might regret signing him to that contract. And I don't know what stipulations there are in terms of can we up that contract, make it a full-time kind of thing. But the Kyle Guy we saw the last 2 weeks is not a G League player. The Kyle Guy we saw is an NBA player.
It's going to be interesting because the only move, and again, the majority of my time from the draft and then the NBA as a whole, is spent on the UVA and the Duke players, and to a certain degree the UW players. I thought every move that was made worked in the benefit of the UVA players right up until the Suns signed Rubio. That one is the one that had me scratching my head a little bit. And, of course, Rubio was available because the Jazz let him go after they got Connolly. I was sitting there in my mind thinking that the Ty Jerome was going to have a great opportunity there. And like you said, you've got a roster now full of ones and twos. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I was looking forward to watching Ty get to play because I have no sound basis for it because I was never worried about Kyle Guy playing in the NBA. I felt like he has the it of the gym rat, the guy that's going to be able to listen to what the coach is saying. I need this from you. He was going to be able to go do it. I was a little more nervous. Not that Ty Jerome would get an opportunity. My question was how quickly he was going to get it. And when they signed Rubio, it made me a little nervous. And then when they made a decision, basically to not have him play out there, it made me a little bit more nervous. That's why I was curious what your take on was because I didn't know if you knew something that I didn't. Because right now it just kind of looks odd from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, it really is. And none of it makes any sense as far as that goes. And I was going to look up to see how. I thought the Suns had played yesterday because Jack Salt. I mean, he's not going to play in the NBA, but I wrote a column about Jack. He scored a basket in his first game, and I want to say he scored one in the second game too. I'm trying to get that up here real quick. He had a DNP coach's decision. No, he had another DNP here, so I was wrong about that. But he got 7 minutes in one of the games, and he scored a basket. And I wrote about how, you know what, he scored 3 points a game at UVA. And people always ask from the time he started playing at UVA, why is this guy on the floor? And he was a guy that didn't put stats up, but Tony Bennett knew I need to have this guy on the floor, and I need to have Kihei Clark, who also doesn't put stats up, on the floor, so I can win a championship. That's what that was. I'm going to win a championship with this guy, and the guys who are going to be in the NBA. But I'm going to win a championship with this guy setting screens for me and everything else. And Jack Salt, by God, he won't. He's nowhere close to being a fall, winter, spring NBA guy. But summer league, he got an offensive rebound. He put it back in the basket. He scored 2 points in an NBA game. I don't care if it's NBA summer league. Jack Salt is a kid that worked his butt off for 5 years at UVA. He had all the people on the message boards questioning, again, his very existence. And shut up, folks. He scored in the NBA, and none of y'all have. So, and Jack will now, he maybe parlays this into a G League. Most likely it's in Europe or New Zealand, his home country. He'll play professionally. He just won't play in the NBA, but he scored an NBA game. That's probably the proudest moment, because I was actually watching when he did it. I didn't watch a highlight. I'm such a nerd. I'm watching these games, and I'm watching Jack Salt set screens in an NBA Summer League game, and then a shot gets missed, and he's hoping he puts it back in. And I felt like a papa watching my son do something when I saw Jack Salt score that basket.
Yeah, I can relate to that because it brings back memories of every NFL pass that I watched Matt Lewis throw to somebody that they caught it. You're just sitting there. For me, I agree absolutely. Salt was incredibly likable. He did what his coach needed him to do, and I think he will play. I think he'll play for years because you can't, the size alone. But it was pretty cool to see that. I didn't get to see the bucket live, but to see it in the box score what was pretty cool. On the Duke side of things, a couple people have had some breakout moments. Emil Jefferson, who was one of the not-freshmen on the 2015 national championship team, somebody who just did all the dirty work during his time there at Duke. He got the loose board and the loose ball and the rebound. He actually had 24 points in a game this week, which was neat to see. It's you know that there's certain players in UVA's case that the guy and Ty and DeAndre are going to get theirs, but seeing the other guys get theirs, even if it's for a moment, I don't know where Jefferson's concerned if it's going to mean he'll have a roster spot someplace, but I kind of think it's pretty cool to score 24 points. And I did have one thought process going back to your conversation about UVA when you're talking about the next couple of years, and it's a little bit of a music analogy as to to tie it together as far as what I think of Tony Bennett. Chris, I'm probably dating myself a little bit. It might have been a little bit before you were really into music. But back in the 70s, Peter Frampton released an album, Frampton Live. And at the time, it was the greatest album ever recorded, by far, shattered every previous album, and was number one forever, sold more copies, and nobody had ever done it before. And 6 months later, Frampton went back in the studio and tried to do a follow-up. And the situation you run into is, because you fast forward all the way to Michael Jackson, when Michael Jackson came out with Thriller. They did it correctly where Thriller was concerned. They played the music out over 2 years. They released singles off that album for 2 years. Michael Jackson didn't put anything else out. And Frampton was quick to come back and say, yeah, he had me to use as a reference. Nobody ever had an album like mine. And the parallel there is Jay Wright. Jay Wright, and we talked about this briefly before Tony won a championship. Jay Wright runs a similar program where he's coaching coachable kids that have NBA talent, but they're not necessarily the can't-miss McDonald's All-Americans. And Jay Wright put it together, and for years there was a knock against Jay Wright. You can't win in March. What does it matter? Then he wins a national championship, and a lot of things changed for him. And then all of a sudden, you've got people knocking at your door who you were never going to have a chance to get into their living room. And Jay Wright had talked about, well, hey, I made some decisions I probably would have done differently. I got away from who I was. And I think that Tony Bennett is going to be able to have that as a reference point to be able to say, okay, yes, more people are going to come to me. More people are going to want to get in. More people want to play for me now. But I still got to stick to what got me here. And I really think that you mentioned the Kool-Aid yesterday with the football, but not to drink too much of the Kool-Aid, but I will be shocked at this point now if Tony doesn't win 3. I just believe that because of the way that he did it and how true he stayed to himself and to his program, and the pattern of how it worked out in Philadelphia for Jay Wright, the fact that Jay Wright came back after learning from his, I don't want to call them errors, but, lapse in judgment, he came back and won another one. And then all of a sudden, you're not a one-hit wonder anymore. You're in a situation where you're a 2-time national champion. And as you were talking about the potential roster that he's got coming up, I'm going to be just stunned if they don't win at least 2 more in the near future because of how he did it, how many people saw how they did it. It's going to be fun, but I was sitting there thinking, and I know there's a lot of similarities between what Jay Wright did at Philadelphia or at Villanova in Philly, and I think the future right now for UVA basketball, sky's the limit, I guess, in my mind.
Yeah, it should be, and the recruiting haul that we've seen the evidence of for the 2020 class will just. It's a year off. I mean, that's when I did that. I did a column in that part of that podcast this week. I've noted that yes, I'm skipping a year ahead. The 2019 team will be fine. If they don't win 25 games and finish in the top 4 in the ACC, I'd be surprised. The ceiling for that team, though, is not what the ceiling for this team was because it's going to be a lot of change. That group, though, that comes in 2020 with the incoming freshmen plus the Marquette transfer Sam Hauser, I mean, you're talking about an influx of talent that is going to be the level of a Duke or Kentucky, and coming into a situation where you have a lot of talent that will come from this 2019 team. They will still be around from that 2019 team, so it'll be the most talented team of the Tony Bennett era. Now there will be young guys to integrate, and that kind of thing. So. But that team will start 2020 with the expectations of what you make that analogy to Jay Wright. He won his first championship in 2016, and he had been to a Final Four a few years before that, and then there was a period of transition in between. He went that first championship, and then they had a transition year 2017, where they had some of those guys leave, go to the NBA. And 2018, they started that year as a favorite, and they played like favorites, and I think. Now we'll see, the next step for this UVA program, now that they've won a national championship, they've finally gotten over that hump. I know those of us in Wahoo Nation have been saying for years, because it's been 6 years now since that first ACC regular season and ACC tournament title back in 2014, 6 seasons ago anyway. We've been thinking of ourselves as, yes, the ACC goes through Charlottesville, But now the rest of the country knows that it's Chapel Hill and Durham and then Charlottesville at the least. And so now you got to play with expectations. And Jay Wright would tell you that the first time he went to a Final Four, which was I think around 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. He started getting access to better players. He's talked about this. He started getting access to better players. He built his system with grittiness and guys who could fit what he wanted to play. And then when he goes to a Final Four, and all of a sudden the 4 and 5 stars that weren't available to him when he was making his rise up were suddenly available to him. And they actually had a losing season a couple years later, because they weren't Jay Wright guys. They were good players. They weren't Jay Wright guys. I think what we're seeing out of Tony is the quality of kids too. Just from what we read, what we see about them. The most recent top recruit, Jabri Abdur-Rahim. His father, Sharif Abdur-Rahim, is the president of the NBA G League. He's been an NBA executive. It speaks volumes to what Tony Bennett offers. That a guy in Sharif Abdur-Rahim, who has so much, who played in the NBA for 12 years himself, he's been an executive, he's now the president of the G League, entrusts the development of his son to Tony Bennett. That speaks volumes about what people in the know think about Tony Bennett. And so, he's staying on that firm foundation. And you say 2 more championships. I'm in my late 40s. Folks out there listening, I'm 47 years old. I hope I have at least another good 30 years. If all I had was 2 more championships, I'm getting greedy now. If all I had was 2 more championships in the next 30 years, Jerry, I'd be disappointed. I want 5. I want 6. I want Coach K level here. And I really think that Tony Bennett is a quality of coach, quality of man, that just if he continues doing what he's been doing, they'll bring those home.
But going back to that same conversation, the only thing that I differed on in listening to you and Scott talk is I don't think when the one and done is over and gone by the wayside, I don't think it's going to have an effect on you. If you look at talking about national championships, Coach K won 4 with 4-year players.
How long goes that?
He won 1 in the last decade, and you brought up a great keep coaching so many more kids because of the one and done. But I can't speak for Cal. I can't speak for what Cal's going to do at Kentucky. But I believe that the drop off that Duke is going to have is going to come when Coach K retires. That's when there will be a drop off. I, as a fan of the program, I welcome the end of the one and done. I've never really liked it. From a standpoint of just again, I think the 4-year players that ended a lot. I think the 4-year players staying ended with players like Tim Duncan and Greg Hill. As far as staying as the norm goes, I don't think that Duke will have a drop off when the one and done's gone. But I do think it'll be a major drop off when Coach K retires.
But
that was a great story. Now,
let me interrupt. No, let me interrupt. So when the contention that Scott and I would give is that when the one and done rule is rescinded, and that looks like it will be the 2021-2022 season if that happens, it will happen then. Coach K's 75 years old in 2022. You think he sticks around until his 80s to be the coach there, or do you think, like I think and like Scott thinks and like other folks think, that when that rule goes away, Coach K says, gosh, it's been great. Thank you for a great career. I'm now handing the keys to Wojo or Chris Collins or whoever might be the case. But you think he sticks around at age 75 to coach guys for 4, 5, 6 years in the future?
Well, here's my thought. And he probably didn't make a lot of radar screens. Okay. One of the people that's joining the program this year, is his grandson. His grandson is coming to play there as a preferred walk-on. So he's going to get a chance for the next 4 years to coach his grandson. I don't think there's anything that prevents that from happening, short of a health scare. I I know what family means to him. And he even had a funny line with it. He was talking about, well, he's earned the right to be here. He's in a situation. I don't expect any troubles from his mother. But I am worried about his grandmother. And which I thought was just a hilarious line talking about Mitch, of course. But yeah, he's there. I would just be, I don't want to say at the house, but, you know, to go forward 4 years. So then at that point, I could see where he's going to step down. And I feel bad for whoever is going, whichever one of those guys is going to take on that job. And it could be that the one and done being gone does run parallel to when he retires. I just don't know that it's going to be that they're directly connected. But yeah, there's no question there's going to be a drop off when he's not there. You can't have. I mean, and it's funny from a standpoint of, you know, people want to compare the runs. You know, what UCLA did was just mind-boggling. It was mind-boggling, but the amount of competition as far as how many great players there were has changed dramatically. And it's going to be interesting. The number one thing that I'm going to be looking for this NCAA season, there's two programs who are trying to capitalize on this right now, and that's Georgia and Memphis, where they're in a situation where both of them this coming year, seeing Georgia in a basketball sense is kind of out of the norm. But they have basically loaded up both rosters with players that I think are going to be either one and done or that you might stick a two and done in there. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I welcome the rule going just because the question is how many players is it going to actually affect? We look back, let's go back before they put the rule in. How many players actually, Daryl Dawkins, Willoughby was one, Coach, LeBron, Garnett. Those are the five that top into my head. I don't think, Chris, that there's that many players that have a game where they could step straight out of high school and play in the NBA. I don't think there's that many.
It doesn't. But here's the thing: it doesn't matter if we don't think that, if they think it, and that's the problem. You know, I would argue that of all these kids that we're talking about as one and dones, if they had been given the option the last 6-7 years to go either go straight from high school to the NBA or go for that 1 year of college, it's hard to imagine that most of them wouldn't have just gone straight to the NBA. And it's only 12 to 15 guys per year when you look at the numbers. But that doesn't mean that those 12 or 15 guys a year congregate in a few programs. Those few programs will be impacted when those players aren't available. And Scott made the point. I'm sure you heard this, and listeners out there would have heard this. It's not like there's a rule like in baseball, where in baseball you can sign with a professional team. You're not going to play Major League Baseball at 18. But you can sign, obviously, be drafted at high school, sign with a professional team, start your minor league career at age 18. But if you don't sign with that team, then you have to go to college for 3 years. That's not what we're talking about here with the NBA. If the NBA, we call it the one and done rule, it's really not that. The NBA just says you have to be a year past your high school graduation before you're eligible for our draft. The NFL has a similar rule. It says 3 years after your high school graduation, you're eligible for our draft. So the NBA is not going to do that. They would just say you can go straight out of high school to the NBA draft. That doesn't mean that there won't be kids who play 1 year of college basketball then decide to go to the NBA. Scott made that point, and that's a very good point. I just think, it logically makes a lot of sense. If you think coming out of high school at age 17 that you're in that discussion, it's hard to imagine one great year of college basketball is going to change you that dramatically, where you don't just say, think of the Jonathan Benders of the world. He had a great McDonald's All-Star game, which is a glorified pickup game, and decided to go pro. Didn't work out for him, but for every Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, there are Jonathan Benders who it didn't work out for. And again, it doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what the NBA scouts think. If they give up their eligibility and they decide to go that way, they're not available to colleges in the first place. There will be 12 or 15 guys a year impacted, and a few programs that traffic in those kids will be impacted.
Well, it's going to be really interesting to see. Like I said, especially in Memphis this year, because you're talking about how loaded UVA is going to be in 2020. I think that Memphis is going to roll out the ball opening day of practice with as talented of a team as I've seen since Vegas when Larry Johnson was there. Now, whether they all pan out or not, you don't know.
Yeah.
But I've never seen, and I'm putting that up against the group that just came out of Duke. So if it works, it's just gonna, Crean at Georgia has signed. He got one of the top 5, and then a couple more. I'm glad the rule's going away. I really am. Because the problem is, Chris, there needs to be, this is one of the things that people have been saying for years, there's got to be some kind of a safety net, in a perfect world there would be, for you mentioned Bender as an example. Somebody who thinks that they're ready, they go there, and then they're not, and then what happens to them?
Yeah.
And that's the scary part. I mean, there's other players. When John Morant went to Murray State, I don't think John Morant was going there thinking I'm a one and done.
No, yeah, exactly.
I think he's somebody who just played his back end off and it was the right stage at the right time. It's going to be fun. The other big guys, I love baseball, but also back then you're looking at baseball, the number of jobs. You're talking about every team has one AAA, one AA. Everyone has at least 2 single A's. Most of them have a third single A and a rookie league.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of opportunities there for people. If you came out of high school, you might be riding a bus someplace, but there was a window to where you could get on that bus and have a chance. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. But the team that's not in the ACC that I'll be keeping an eye on, come fall is Memphis, because if it works, it's going to be scary. It'll be absolutely scary as to how, if they all live up to the hype, what that will be like, and then that will then become the next option. The next option of, hey, if Penny Hardaway played in the NBA, that's something that he has, and Cal and Coach K, as wise as they are, as great as they are, Penny Hardaway is if he pulls this off this year, I think the remaining players of that caliber are going to be lining up to go play for Memphis. But again, it's speculation at this point. But I'm excited that I think that Coach K's there for at least 4 more years. But I feel bad. I feel bad for whoever has to try to fill those shoes. I don't think it's going to be an easy fill. But if I can switch gears for one second.
I gotta make a comment. You said something about Memphis. I'm gonna put this in stone. 22-11 first round tournament exit. So there you go. That's what's going to happen with Memphis this year. Now go ahead. Because it's not going to work. Coach K, Coach Cal can coach. Penny Hardaway is going to hold a clipboard and roll a ball out there. Not the same with your one and done. So again, now go ahead.
Well, I'm hoping you're correct, because I think it hurts the game if it works. I think it hurts. I'm with you. I would take that prediction and run to the bank with it, because I don't want this to go further in the other direction. I'm hoping that it doesn't become this overnight success where people are like, hey, we can still do this. I wanted to switch gears. You got me thinking about football. And the ACC, and this one won't be front page news, but I'm sure you guys will talk about it a little bit next week. Bowl season, and again, I'm loving the Kool-Aid you're drinking, and I think a lot of it ties to such an impressive showing down in Charlotte. But the ACC, Chris, is in the process drawing up the papers, if you will. We're going to add Boston and San Diego and lose Shreveport and Detroit. And I'm so excited about San Diego. San Diego's got a lot of history. It's had a couple of name changes, but it's a good bowl. But the idea that's just a major upgrade in my mind. Now, as a reporter, you're going to go wherever the team is playing. As a fan, you're going, well, hey, if I have to go someplace, I think sunny San Diego is a good deal. But I wanted to get your take on. I don't understand. I understand what the Expo and the bowl game and what it means to the community and what it means to the charity. What is your thought on playing in another version of the Ice Bowl in Fenway Park?
Well, in general, too many bowl games. Just in general, it's the participation trophy culture we live in. I liked it when there was a year UVA was 8-3 back in the early '90s and didn't get a bowl game. I mean, that sucked, but you had to earn it. It's just now they're just giving out prizes to everybody, and you get to go on trips. And yeah, a sucky trip to Boston. No offense to Boston. Boston's I've never been, but I'm sure and I want to go to Fenway Park, not for a football game. Well, I guess I don't know if they're going to play it at Fenway or play it at Gillette Stadium, whatever they're going to do. But no, there's too many bowl games. We need to make it mean more. I know it's and it has nothing to do with meaning more or anything else. It's all about ESPN largely creating content. They want people to have stuff to watch when they're having their various Christmas and New Year's dinners and everything else for that 2-week period of time. They call it Bowl Week, make a big deal of it. It's just stuff more in the background. This, and now you're going to hear me rant in general. I'm also a mixed martial arts fan. UFC's big plan is to put on a UFC show literally every day. They're not there yet, but that's the long-term plan, is to put a UFC show on every day. Content is king, they say. No. How about good content? How about good football? The NCAA has it right in basketball. We still have the silly, even the NIT is silly to me, but then we have the college basketball insider tournament and CBI and all this stuff. But we all know what really means something is that NCAA basketball tournament where every team playing has a chance to win a championship. I just wish we'd throw away all these silly bowl games, have a 20 or 24 team tournament. They'll never do it because they'll claim it's about the student athletes needing to go to class. They don't care about the teams having to travel during the NCAA tournament. I know how the travel schedule was then. I was exhausted, and I didn't have to go to class in between. That 4 weeks was the most exhausting 4 weeks of my life. They don't care about that. It's all about creating content for ESPN. And if a 24 team tournament or a 16 team tournament, whatever it might be, is only 15 games or 18 games, whatever it might be. It's not 45 games that are on TV like wallpaper all December long. I would rather have good games than a bunch of games, but they want to have just a bunch of games, and that's what they're doing. So that's my rant. I know that's not where you were going with this, Jerry. You love the bowl games, everything else. I want good stuff, and of course with football too. I don't want kids out there getting hurt in front of 3,000 people in some random stadium where nobody cares except for a few alums on either side. Football's a dangerous sport. Play the games that mean something, and if guys are going to tear their ACL, have it be in a game that actually leads to a championship, not just fodder for ESPN to make a few extra advertising dollars. Anyway, that's my rant. I'm sorry, I'm kind of ranting on the parade there, but that's my feeling on both.
Actually, I'm spot on with you on adding more at this point. I think that Boston, the Fenway Park, is just mimicking the Yankee Stadium game.
Yeah.
I think it's a money grab. And I don't think it's going to be well attended once the novelty wears off. I can't think that the playing surface is going to be what it ought to be. I'm glad that a team from the ACC might go to San Diego instead of Detroit. But we have reached saturation. There's no, I like bowl games more than you like bowl games, but I think we've hit a point now where when you have to start setting up rules to see which 5 and 7 team gets to go first, the Boston one makes no sense to me. And again, I'm comparing it to Boise only because Boise's been in place for a while. But to add something new that I don't think there's a niche for, it just feels wrong. You're sitting there, and it's a situation to where I think that the other brand new one on tape is going to be Myrtle Beach, but you are getting a very, very watered down product from that standpoint. And I know from a time standpoint, I want to flip the switch on the last thing here.
Okay.
Normally, you give me the last thing, and I try to make it about women's sports. But I have to believe, I'm going to leave it with you, that the run that the national team just went through had a little bit of the women's soccer team, had a little bit of everything to it. Yeah. And instead of hearing me talk about it, I want to see what Chris Graham took away from that, from the tournament itself, the parade, and everything that went with it as they fight for it.
I didn't watch the parade. I have to admit, I didn't watch the parade, but I did watch the knockout rounds, and I even watched one of the prelim, or one of the round robin matches too. And I made it a point. We were down in Virginia Beach last week. We actually went to the Buffalo Wild Wings there intentionally to watch it with other fans. I wanted to experience at least one game with a group of hardcore soccer fans, and it was great. It was awesome. People there wearing American flag shirts and waving flags, and we're drinking beers and having a great time together, just cheering when I think that was the Britain game. That was the semifinal game. That we watched that with, and it was great to be part of something bigger like that. It was great to see, honestly. I've done work the last year, and I'll be doing it again this year, broadcasting men's and women's soccer, college soccer for ESPN3 with VMI. It was great to see and hear from as many knowledgeable soccer fans. They weren't just people there rooting for USA because it's USA and they don't know anything about it. There were a lot of knowledgeable fans out there watching the games, and so. The fight for equality, I've done a lot of research. I've not written on this yet because I don't feel quite knowledgeable enough to write on it with authority yet, but I'm close. It's not even a matter of, because obviously from a success standpoint, the women are so far beyond our men, and we would love it if our men would get to that level, and I can only imagine what it would be like if they were to play themselves up to that level. I'm not sure they ever will, but so it's not even a question of that. But when you look at the finances, the women's team brings in a lot of money. The ratings were up this year from where they were 4 years ago when the women won the World Cup. But they were significantly up over even at least the American ratings over the final for the World Cup, the most recent men's World Cup. And so, they're bringing in those dollars. They're selling the memorabilia. They're filling up the stadiums for the friendlies. I mean, it's clear that we're not just talking about, and I don't think it should, but I think that there are probably still some people out there who think when they hear, well, the women want the same money as the men. Well, they don't make the same money as the men. This isn't to me simply a fairness argument. This is they deserve it because they're bringing the money in argument. And so that's where it really boggles the mind that the situation is what it is. I mean, I know, it's, we talked about this, Jerry, recently. You brought up the travel situation that always comes up every summer. There's always a WNBA team that has an issue where they have to end up, taking a flight and getting off a plane and playing a game without any rest in between. And I raised the point, well, unfortunately, that's the economics of the business. The WNBA doesn't bring money in, the NBA does, and blah, blah, blah. Well, this is not that. The women's national team brings in the money. This isn't just being fair for the sake of being fair. This is being fair because it's demanded that if justice is done, it's fair. So yeah, that's a good one. I got a good rant out of that.
Well, Chris, I gotta say we've talked a lot of sports over the years, and I've had a lot of great conversations with you. That's as much as you made me smile in a long time. It's funny, you can't compare all of the sports. You can't. But in this one, I think it's just obvious.
Yeah.
I think it's obvious, and to get to hear you say it, and it makes me smile. I'm sitting there going, these women, like them, love them, hate them, whatever it is. If you get a chance, don't worry about the whole parade. But if you get a chance to hear the speech, it's a great speech. And these people came in and they dominate. They sell the jerseys, they fill the stadium. So thank you for actually getting on the soapbox and saying that for me. It's greatly appreciated.
Oh yeah. We were Crystal and I were both fixed to the TV when the women played, and then now the cultural aspect. Yeah, they are such great role models for everybody, not just for the little girls out there, but they're role models for everybody. And they're really making us look at things differently. I mean, it's again. To me, it would be demeaning, and I've seen some of these columns out there, and that's why I want to be very careful when I finally write about this, where it just feels like, all right, the point sort of is made. We're just being fair to be fair. No, this isn't about being fair to be fair. They're that good, and I'm a numbers guy. I write a lot. I write a lot of sports business articles, and we talk a lot about sports business on the podcast in general. Money, the money dictates that this fairness be done, and so it will happen. It will happen. It just needs to happen. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. That economic justice needs to be done. And that said, now the gauntlet's thrown down. Hey, fellas, play up. I watched Sunday morning or Sunday morning into early afternoon for us. It was Sunday morning for you entirely out on the West Coast. Sunday night, I did watch. I've become a soccer aficionado in the last couple of years with my work and broadcasting and such. I got to get ready for my season starting here in about a month or so, I guess it is, for me starting college broadcasting. So I watched the men play in the Gold Cup, the regional championship against Mexico. Final score was only 1-0. They got dominated, and so you feel like you're kind of back at the starting point with the men, but the gauntlet's down. Our women are that good. You guys have no excuse. The same system that produced them is there for you, and now our men need to rise to the level. So our ladies are out there. They're setting the agenda. They're setting the tone, and it's time for the men to step up and earn their money.
There you go. Very, very well said. And again, a big smile listening to it. It's funny is because there's, I don't want to consider myself a champion of the effort, but every now and then it's different. And this is one of those where it's not a nice, feel-good story. These women have put together a team and a program that are capable of dominating on the world stage. So. Yeah. That's a great note there to end on. I've really enjoyed that conversation. I look forward to following all of the Who's and some of the Duke as go forward. And maybe next time we'll know where Chris Paul's going to play next year.
That's right. Well, Jerry and I will get back together next week. I'll be coming back from Charlotte next Thursday, but I'm sure Jerry will want to kind of quiz me on what I learned at the ACC Kickoff next week, our first impression of the 2019 football season. So, and of course, Scott German and I will be there, just giving you a little bit of a signpost here, so to speak. But Scott and I will be there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll break in with some podcasts, some Facebook Live videos, etc. We'll be in heaven as far as that goes, so don't worry about us. But then, Jerry and I will get together. We'll kind of break some things down. And Jerry, thanks for your time, and our listeners, thank you for your time listening to us here, and we'll talk again next week.